Coogs House. All right, listen, the first year under a new head coach is supposed to be a little daunting, maybe even a little scary, but is it supposed to be this scary?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Want to join the conversation but don't know what to say? Tell us when you order fajitas, what kind of tortillas you order. Today's show is brought to you by GameTime. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. More fun on that later. But today we got to talk about Big 12 media being anti-Houston. Look, there's some significance to this, I promise. It's not just media jargon, but I also want to look at like guys getting snubbed. And really kind of the culmination of it all is the Houston Cougars as a program getting snubbed. And that is that they came in 15th out of 16 teams in the new look Big 12 preseason media poll. 15 out of 16. Now, this is Houston's second year in the Big 12. It was one of 4 expansion teams last year. Losing 2 teams, adding 4 more. The Big 12 is up to 16. And Houston in the preseason poll voted on by media members. I wasn't included in that actually this year. I was last year. They asked me my opinions. This year they did not. I don't know. Anyway, Houston comes in 15th. I would not have put Houston 15th. I don't want to be too homer and say to put them first, but I would not have put them 15th. Now, I think this is interesting for a number of different things. One, Houston got just 157 media votes, or like vote points. They calculate points based on where you get placed in different polls. For reference, the 16th place team was Arizona State at 147 or 141, Houston 157. Cincinnati last year, also new to the Big 12, comes in at 14th at 196. BYU, new to the Big 12 last year as well, comes in 13th at 215. Big jump there between Houston and Cincinnati. Nice small jump there between Cincinnati and BYU as well. Pretty sizable gap in the polling then from 13th to 12th, which is up to Baylor at 268. And then a large jump from Baylor to newcomer Colorado goes from 268 to 400, right? That keeps on having these like big gaps along the way here. I think it's interesting from a number of fronts. One, Houston is a few spots behind Baylor, who they beat last year. Houston beat Baylor at their place in Waco, and Houston comes in at 15. Baylor comes in at 12. The point discrepancy is over 100 media polling points between the two. Pretty consensus look at Baylor being ahead of Houston. Well, Houston beat them last year and made an upgrade in the coaching staff. I can't make sense of that one. I just can't. I really can't when you look at the other team Houston beat last year on a Thursday night at home, admittedly, but Houston beat West Virginia in their other Big 12 win last season. West Virginia is in 7th with 581 media polling points. That's really high in this, actually, if you're paying attention to how things go in the top half of the conference. And it's interesting that, again, you think Houston is better than they were last year. Houston beat them last year. Houston is well below where they stand, and it just feels over the top disrespectful. Now, if you think West Virginia did that well in transfer portal or brings the right guys back or what have you, maybe Houston losing a Matthew Golden in the transfer portal, losing a Dot Nwankwo, those things happen, right? But being that big a gap is interesting, to say the least. I'm just not sure where that comes from. The other one that's interesting to me is, as I look at this, I mentioned that at 14, you got Cincinnati, 13, you got BYU. Those are the other teams that came in. Two of the other three teams came in with Houston into the Big 12. Clearly, people think that those schools are still adjusting to power football, right? The other newcomers, this year's newcomers should say, Utah is the consensus, almost consensus, number one team. They got 20 first-place votes, 906 media polling points. Arizona came in at fifth place overall, 3 first-place votes, and 762 points in the media polls, right? Clearly, it's not a newcomer to the Big 12 thing as much as it's Houston, Cincinnati, BYU are new to power football kind of thing, right? Which would make sense, except that UCF, Central Florida, which came from the American, just like Houston and Cincinnati, is sitting at 8th with 551 media polling points. It's squarely between West Virginia and Texas Tech. So right there, you've got a team Houston beat, a team Houston came in with and should be on a level playing field with from a resources standpoint. We know they're not necessarily in terms of dollars and cents and NIL deals. Central Florida's killed that, right? But Texas Tech, right there, you competed with them for better part of a half at least. Again, you think you're getting better, play them at their place. They're at ninth, right? It feels very clear amongst all of this that the media voting in this, and again, I didn't get to vote in this year apparently, thinks Houston took a step backwards. Meanwhile, it thinks very lowly of the teams that joined the conference last year, and that all of them are worse than 8th, and that 3 of the 4 are after 13th, right? I will say I'm sure Richie over at Locked On Arizona State is having his own pulling his hair out moments looking at this as well, because they came in even further down the totem pole, the furthest down the totem pole. But Houston being separated by so much feels disrespectful because it does not feel like the steps forward that Houston made are being acknowledged, right? Houston made an improvement in the head coach and the coaching staff, right? Houston has Donovan Smith coming back with a year of starting under his belt. Houston's made improvements along different spots in the defensive half of the football, on the defensive side of the football. We talked about Houston improving their run scheme, Kevin Barbie coming in, changing up the offense some, and we talked yesterday some about how the offensive line is better at some things, going to be challenged in others, right? And so I think on the whole, well, obviously Houston's not rebuilt yet, and it is a rebuilt thing. It doesn't feel like that's necessarily what the rest of the conference media folks thought. Don't know why that is, outside of starting over, starting fresh, losing on a lot of names. The transfer portal was kind of a national story. And honestly, this schedule, what you're flashing up for the video audience, is a daunting one. I'm going to talk about it a lot this season, but that's a really, really challenging schedule, right? You don't get a FCS school. You get 2 group of 5 teams. You think you can beat Rice, but they did beat you a year ago. Open up with UNLV. That's not an easy game by any stretch. You have to go to Norman. You have to go to Arrowhead. You have to go to Arizona, right? And then we have the gauntlet of a month that we've talked about where you go from Kansas, Utah, Kansas State, Arizona, boom, 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 right? That's 4 teams in the top 5 in the conference preseason in the span of a month. So maybe they're just looking at wins and losses and not necessarily steps forwards and backwards and thinking like Houston's not ready for that schedule. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. Doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel fair. And that's at the team level. I think that there's perhaps worse injustices done at the individual level. But first, we're talking about all these injustices and things that went wrong. I want to make sure we take a time out to talk about things that can go right for you, and that's you're looking for baseball tickets or comedy shows or theater or concerts or whatever you want to do this summer when the weather gets better. because it will get better. And I feel bad for folks going through a lot right now. The city of Houston's going through a lot right now with the weather. But if you're looking to, set something on the calendar for a date in the future to have like an optimistic, hey, a couple weeks from now, we're going to go do blank, right? That thing can get tickets. You can get tickets for that thing on GameTime. Download GameTime Ad today. Use code Locked On College for $20 off your purchase. They have all kinds of last minute deals, flash deals, zone deals, all in pricing. Great things to make sure you're getting the best price, lowest price guarantee. GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find tickets in the same section or row for less. GameTime has all kinds of great ticket coverage and insurance options as well. So make sure you go check out GameTime. Download the GameTime app today. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. The GameTime, download the GameTime app. Create a code using code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account. Redeem code Locked On College. LOCKED ONCOLLEG for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Lowest prices. Last minute tickets. Guaranteed. All right, so I mentioned the injustices along the team sides of things on this, and I do think Houston got a little screwed there, if we're being frank. But that Houston didn't get a single person named to the preseason all-conference team makes me feel like we don't watch the same kind of football here. I don't understand. And frankly, I'm not even saying Houston should have had every one of their good players on it. I understand why people are looking past Houston a little bit at the national level. Deion Sanders is coming in, and Ollie Gordon, who is in a little bit of trouble recently, returned to the conference with all these great rushing numbers from a year ago and stuff like that. But as I look at the full top to bottom preseason all Big 12 team, I can't help but notice that there's people from Houston missing. Like, you cannot tell me that because of a tie, you could name 4 wide receivers better than Joseph Manjack. I just don't think that's the way this goes. Now, I understand that Manjack can get a lot of single cut, like number one target kind of stuff, double teams and stuff like that. He's not going to get the same kind of single coverage he got a year ago. But to have multiple slot guys in there ahead of Joseph Manjack for preseason all Big 12 is ridiculous to me. I mean, you could argue he was their most consistent red zone target or best red zone target or maybe even best receiver a year ago, right? And he comes back, gets to work on that same chemistry he had with Donovan Smith and projects to have a bigger role in the offense, at least in the passing offense. I can't believe he's not on this list, right? Now, I understand that Shedeur Sanders and the Deion Sanders of it all is going to put Shedeur as the preseason all Big 12 quarterback and the first team quarterback or whatever. But we've also heard Donovan Smith talked about as an NFL draft pick, and didn't see his name mentioned on any of these teams. And on offense, I think part of this is also like by the end of the season, we're looking at Jamarian Burnett and Parker Jenkins having big-time rushing numbers. And because Houston's changing offenses, I guess maybe they're not in the calling here. I also think that both Ollie Gordon and Taj Brooks, while Ollie Gordon may be about to get in some trouble, those guys could be – I mean, they had great numbers last year and coming back, right? And so I guess that's the deal. But Houston's going to put up some rushing yards. Houston's going to they have the running backs to do it. They have the system to do it. And I can't believe there's just no love across any skill position for Houston at all. We talked yesterday about how long Tank Jenkins has been playing college football and the leadership he brings, the veteran aspect of his game. That he didn't get a nod at any of these offensive line spots was surprising me as well. He did get one with Phil Steele, the college football writer, for his preseason all Big 12 team. That he didn't get one in the actual media, the Big 12 media, is interesting to me. Kind of feels like you aren't familiar with my work kind of thing with him from a year ago. I mean, he's been in this conference. He's played in this conference. He knows what he's getting into. Just don't see it. The potential 2 biggest snubs, though, individually, are probably on the defense side of the football. And I know that Houston Cougars are not used to thinking of Houston as a defensive juggernaut or anything like that. But the defense is going to be better this year. It's the Willie Fritz thing, right? But B has two guys that dominated the spring game, has two guys that did very well in college football, Division I college football a year ago against great competition, and are both wearing Houston Cougar red this fall and are nowhere to be found on this preseason team either. The first is returning Houston Cougar A.J. Haulcy. In the defensive backfield in the all-conference team, they've got 4 corners, and their lone safety is a converted wide receiver. And A.J. Haulcy is nowhere to be found. That's just not right. There are not 2 or 3 safeties better than A.J. Haulcy in the Big 12. There just aren't. Now, Haulcy gets asked to do a lot. He has to play down the box in the run game. Haulcy, for its worth, also will go for big hits at times and stuff like that. He's a growing player. But Halsey's really good. And I can't believe, especially when they listed 4 corners and a single safety that used to not play safety, that there was no spot for him on the preseason all-conference team. Feels just wrong and inaccurate. It just feels like people didn't look at Houston for any of these spots. If you're not going to put A.J. Haulcy on here, you're not looking at any of these spots, right? And the other one, it feels like people just they didn't watch Tulane play Ole Miss, play USC. Tulane was really good in the defensive trenches last year, and that was in large part because of Keith Cooper, defensive. He'll play the 4 technique for Houston, head up on the tackle, kind of an end, kind of a defensive tackle. Keith Cooper is deserving of being on this team. I guess I get his snub a little bit more than I get A.J. Halsey's because he was in the Big 12 last year, so Big 12 media folks might not be familiar with his game. But, man, you turn on the tape, it takes 3 or 4 plays, and you can see what we're talking about. I mean, he's that good with his hands. He's that good with his pad level. He's that strong. He's that aggressive. He's that physical. I just don't see what Keith Cooper could have done differently to be on this list, especially when he is also on Phil Steele's preseason All Big 12 list. And I got to say that that's just disheartening because he's making the jump to Big 12 football, but he's played very well against other Power 5 opponents in the past, and now there's Power 4 and Houston's in it. I just feel like, honestly, I don't understand how he's not the guy or how he's not marked as a all-conference kind of player on this list. I mean, you've got guys with similar measurables across the board, too. With the exception of Dante Corleone, you kind of have and we should also say we're hoping he gets healthy soon. You kind of have guys around his size. I mean, BJ Green from Colorado is also 6'1", 270. I mean, these guys, and I guess Tyler Batty at BYU is 6'5", but he's 275. These guys, I guess we fall in love with the sacks and the sack numbers, but that we also know that's not the only thing defensive linemen do. And Keith Cooper does a lot more than just his numbers. And oh, by the way, he also has good numbers. I don't see a disconnect there unless they don't think doing against USC or Ole Miss translates for him from Tulane as he did when he was there. And if it doesn't translate from him against USC while he was at Tulane or Ole Miss or whatever, then why does it transfer for BJ Green, who played at Colorado, which was at the bottom of the Pac-12 last year? Right? Why is it translate? Like, these things just don't make sense. And I feel like Houston is bearing the brunt of underachieving last season some, right? And that's unfortunate. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot to a lot of people, but there is significance to this, and there is something to pay attention to in this. That is that, Houston did underachieve last season. I think that's fair to say. No one expected that team to go 4-8. People expected to do things like beat the Rices of the world, wanted a bigger showing against a couple teams. you're hoping to get one or two more of those games, or you only played one good half, maybe have a good quarter in the second half, something like that, right? But the reason it's significant to look at who gets these Big 12 nods, where Houston ranks in the preseason media polling for the Big 12 and so on, is that while it's not the end product by any stretch, and that is ultimately the most important thing in all of this, you are trying to win recruiting battles. Houston's trying to go get guys in the class of 2025 in Willie Fritz's first full year of recruiting. And they see these lists too. They see who's getting recognized too. They see where the names pop up too. Now, I say that to say, obviously, Houston's done incredibly well. Class 2025 is shaping out great. I cannot express that enough, that Willie Fritz doing a great job. However, when you've got offers out there to some 4- and 5-star kids that, have options, it would be nice for them to be like, hey, you can come be just like this guy, right? This guy that is preseason all-conference. This guy, people paid attention to Keith Cooper. People paid attention to Tank Jenkins. People paid attention to Joe Manjack. You can come be the next one of those. People watch them here. Now, again, it's not as important as the end of season stuff, but I do think that when you talk to recruits, and there is no blanket statement for all recruits. Not every recruit cares about NIL. Not every recruit cares about facilities. Not every recruit cares about uniforms. Not every recruit cares about, relationship the coach has with their moms or whatever, right? But every recruit does have something that they care about. And there are a group of recruits that cares about things like who's watching Houston from a media perspective. Does Houston get that respect nationally because they know that they have the talent if they get seen to go do something, right? And so that's why this carries over and it is important. It does matter. I think it's really, though, it's not that people, I do think people don't watch Houston enough and just talk about it like they're seeing something they're not seeing because they're not watching it. I do think that there's some of this that people are looking at the talent that left in Matthew Golden, in Nwankwo, and whatever, and not necessarily factoring in like, yeah, but Nwankwo missed time hurt, and Golden was kind of neutralized as a receiver. He was more of a specialist last year, and those kinds of things. People are more focused in on stars and talent and not on production. It's easy to do that. But I come back to, as I said in the opening segment, people are also looking at this, the schedule for the folks at home listening to the audio recording of the podcast. The schedule is challenging. It's one of the toughest schedules in America. Based on last season's win percentage, it's actually the third toughest schedule in all of Power 4 football, right? Fritz is resetting a lot of things. Every culture has to have a reset. This season, with that schedule and this stage of the reset, is going to be challenging. We're going to have to look at this season and find ways beyond wins and losses to measure growth. Now, do I think we can come out the gates and upset Oklahoma? I think it's any given Saturday you can beat anyone you play. Why not us? Yes. I think that they'll win games like that people don't see them. And frankly, Oklahoma would be a very Willie Fritz thing to do, right? However, this schedule's really challenging. The Oklahoma trip in week 2, big time difficult. I mentioned no FCS trips, big time difficult, right? Next most challenging schedule in the Big 12, based on the same win percentage from last season metric, would be Colorado. But they get to play North Dakota State, Colorado State. They don't play Utah. Instead of Oklahoma, they're playing Nebraska, right? Those things are dramatically different. And that's the next most difficult schedule in the conference, right? We'll talk a lot about the stretch that is Murderers Row for Houston, but at Kansas, home versus Utah, home versus Kansas State, and at Arizona that's something, I mean, no SEC team wants to do that. No one in America could do those 4 games consecutively undefeated. That's just not going to happen. Can Houston do it? Again, any given Saturday, or in this case, Fridays and Thursdays and stuff included, yes, it can all happen. But the media is obviously hedging their bets there and saying it probably doesn't, right? Now, all that is to say that this could be a difficult fall in terms of wins and losses. It could be a fun one in terms of having some upset wins and not, right? Like, I think there'll be those moments too. But that's not what the important thing for this fall is. The reset's the important thing. Fritz establishing culture is the important thing. You got kind of 3 steps to this rebuild. You clean out the bus, get your guys on the bus where they're supposed to go, and then you drive the bus, right? That's the way this rolls. And this year is about cleaning out the bus. Year 2 is about getting the right guys on the bus in the right seats. And then year 3, once those guys have been in the system for a year, is take off and drive the bus. Fritz is a 5-year contract, right? So, like, theoretically, that's how this thing gets turned around under Fritz. Now, could things work faster with NILs and transfer portals and Big 12 money and sure, it could all work faster. I just don't think it's necessarily work by like week 6 of the season faster. That'd be challenging. I have high hopes. Again, I think Houston's going to upset some people this year. And I really do think Oklahoma could be one of those upsets out the gate for a number of reasons. We'll get to the season. But it's going to be challenging. And I think that the significance of this preseason media polling is that people see that it's going to be challenging. Doesn't mean they made the wrong hire. Doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong. It just is part of this reset process. It was more than 10 years ago at this point, but Sampson did it in basketball too. It's been a long time since the football program did it and got good really fast, but even when they brought in Case Keenum 15 years ago, like, there was some resetting that needed to happen then too, and he's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play college football, right? Like, these things take time, and the significance of this media polling, while it may impact what recruits see and think, or some of them do, or it may impact this or may impact that, what it really might signify, in the most literal meaning of significance, is that people see that and see where this is going. Or maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I'm just a quack. Maybe I know what I'm talking about. Tell me in the comments down below if you think, A, Houston should have been higher or lower. I guess you could have been 1 spot lower in the preseason. B, who you think got snubbed on the roster, if I missed anyone from preseason all-conference nods. And C, if I'm missing anything with significance of all this, or if I'm alluding to for even thinking about it. Thanks for making us your first listen today, each and every day at Locked On Coogs. Locked On Coogs is primary Locked On podcast. Time is your team every day. Go Coogs. And I hope we're helping distract from the kind of stuff happening in the chaotic, crazy, stormy world we live in these days. Go Coogs.